You're nommed for an Olivier Award, shortlisted for the Evening Standard Award, and then there's a host of solo performance awards that I won't even be able to reel off. So it must be especially great that such a kind of cruel, callous character is getting so much love from critics and audiences.
Yeah, that's been a real feeling of it actually, that it's that people have embraced a very unhappy person. And one of the lines in the play at the end is that she's worried that she's alone, and it was just such testament to everybody came to see it that she's not, and it's a real relief that that character's not alone, because I certainly relate to her, I think.
Well, the character you played before this, Jo, in The One, both she and Fleabag, they're very self-absorbed people, but they're not unaware of that. And in fact, they do spend a lot of time telling us how awful they are, don't they?
Yeah, I think they're quite provocative women. I feel like both Vicky and I talk a lot about how there are few times that we've seen on stage complicated and complex women who lie and are awful and betray people in the same way that there are loads of brilliant male characters that do that all the time, and the best ones we love as well. And that was I sort of was getting jealous that I don't really get to play those sorts of parts that often, and that's really where it came from. And the part of Jo in The One was exactly that. And Vicky said she was writing it with me in mind in terms of what she knew I'd find fun, and playing bad people with a good heart is a glorious sort of component. Yeah.
So does that confessional aspect of both characters, particularly in this because it's a monologue, so it has that element kind of foregrounded, is that quite easy for you to tap into?
I feel like the confessional thing is slightly addictive because it feels dangerous, and you feel like if you're being spoken to by someone who's telling only you something and only you must know this, and this is their private life, which feels which is really how I feel when I'm performing Fleabag, is that this is my gang of people on that night, and they're the only people that can hear into Fleabag's head, and that kind of sense of frisson and danger you get with it is something that I enjoy doing a lot. And I think it actually is easier than playing somebody who is who's very tied up and doesn't give much away, because having a kind of sparkle in your eye is a lot easier to play, I think. Yeah.
Well, the press notes, they describe her as some sort of woman living her life. What sort of woman is Fleabag, and where did the name Fleabag come from?
I'd like to think that she's sort of every woman in lots of ways, because I tried to touch on something about every aspect of her character. So there are moments of her kindness, there are moments of her being selfish, there are moments of her self-revelation when she realises that she might be, or she fears that she might be perverted because she has been sucked into this world of pornography, or she might be unkind because she abandoned a boyfriend, and all those things that are actually really natural, that can happen to anybody, and it and I suppose I feel like that I imagine all those things do happen to everybody, and it's just the fact that she can sort of say and make a joke out of it, and then sort of actually genuinely wonder if she's crazy or not. And I feel like that must be everyone, right? That's got to be.
I think that's where a lot of the uncomfortable laughter in the play comes from. Not just that it's pretty shocking stuff, but it's probably also self-recognition. Can you kind of tell the difference?
Oh,
do you think, when you're up there?
Yes, that's actually such a joy of performing it, is the quality of laughs and the different characters of laughs that come out through the night. Because there's the earlier ones, which was sort of it was on purpose, was to just kind of set the tone, so people sort of laugh and go, I can't believe she just said that about a period and a habit and all that stuff, and to show that the blasé sort of character. And then later on, as it gets a little bit more nuanced, the laughter, I can feel, there's one laugh in particular that all girls laugh at and all boys are very confused by. And pretty much after every show, Vicky and I started asking people if they got what that joke was, and all the girls completely got it, and the guys just don't get it, so that's always very entertaining. She
does have a fierce intelligence behind her. It's not just shock jocking, is it? And I think that's kind of...
Oh, yeah. absolutely
Do you
not.
think that's why she is appealing?
I think I feel like when an audience feels like they're in safe hands, like they feel like they've met a storyteller, and that there are moments that Fleabag can manipulate, and you're aware that she's manipulating you and how you're receiving a story, like if there's a delayed punchline or there's something like that. I think, and I can feel an audience relax immediately when they go, okay, you're gonna screw us around a bit over the next hour. We can feel it, and we're looking forward to it. And if that's a kind of manifestation of her own intelligence, I think then absolutely people respond to that.
And Fleabag and her friend Boo, they sing songs about how happy they are to be modern women and smoking and shagging and taking the lunch break off to go and get an abortion. But of course they're profoundly unhappy, and I'm wondering if underneath all that kind of vulgar talk, is this your State of the Nation address as to where women have gone a little wrong in the last couple of decades?
Yeah, I sort of feel like it's a call to arms to start talking about it, I think, because and in a way that can be amusing and ironic, but I do feel that there's a loneliness in a lot of women that I've met, or like a fear that we're not sure how to articulate ourselves about our sexuality or about where we are now, and there's so much about female sexuality and femininity and feminism which feels so taboo still, like even talking about abortions or talking about women's sex lives, and I just feel like there's still so many areas that aren't talked about. And when we're alone, I feel like women talk, and they have such a huge sense of humour about it so often, but that particular sense of humour which is used to purge of the stresses and the kind of pressures of these like modern lives that we're all living. And it's so rarely seen on the stage or on TV, and I think that's also why it felt like a sort of a breath of fresh air when Vicky Jones and I were talking like this. And when I first wrote the first sort of 10 minutes of the play, it was for her, and it was for the sense of humour that we have been cultivating between us for ages. And she was like, "This is how we joke with each other, and it's how we talk to each other." And I was like, "Well, if it makes us laugh, it's got to make someone else laugh, and it's got to touch somebody else, and we can't be the only ones that relate to it."
So is that a big part of the reason why Fleabag and The One, other than the fact that you star in both, have that similarity?
Yeah, I mean, we talk all the time about that, and we talk all the time about things that there are certain things that I think only Vicky would say or do, and those things would make me laugh more than I could possibly imagine, and vice versa. And we just live our lives just challenging each other to do that. And when it's when we actually started crafting them into work, the most exciting thing about it is that we encourage each other to keep that essence of our own personal friendship, as well as helping each other craft our own plays. But it's keeping that naughtiness that makes it fun, and that sense of danger. I think it's that sense of, because there are sometimes when we do say, are we allowed to say this? And it's sort of a stupid question. It's, of course you're allowed to say anything. That's the best thing about theatre, is you're allowed to say anything.
And the fact that you've done these back to back, I like to think that Boo is a nickname for Joe. That Fleabag and Joe are actually best
so nice.
mates.
They definitely would be. I think if they met, they'd be relieved to meet each other.
The reaction, and specifically women that you've talked to, or maybe things you've overheard afterwards in the bar here at the Soho Theatre, what have been some of the most divisive and dividing things that you've heard?
I feel I've sometimes met very emotional women afterwards who've been in floods of tears, and that's and the sort of surprising and exciting thing about it is twice it's happened when there have been two girls who were crying and came up and said they wanted to talk to me about the play, and then I was like, "Why are you crying?" And they sort of go, "I don't know why I'm crying, I'm just crying." And I think there was a sense of catharsis for some audience members. I think some of them as well, it didn't have the same impact at all, because I think it's interesting, because either it's just a kind of rollicking ride of kind of like a little slice of this woman's life that someone can get involved in and laugh at and with and feel the pathos for. And some people, I think, it can really ring bells with them, and it feels very personal with them. And either way, it's thrilling. And guys as well. Like it's silly to talk about it only as the female audience, because the really great thing, I mean, the awful thing is that so many people have asked on the build up to this show, because when it was billed as a one-woman show, there were so many press and just lots of people just saying, do you think, as a genuine question, were saying, do you think men will enjoy this play? I was like, what sort of question is that? Like, do you think men will enjoy an hour play, which is basically what it is? And because it had been written by a woman and it was about a woman and it was played by a woman, there was some assumption that it wouldn't be interesting to men, and that made me furious. And so it was really great to hear that a lot of men enjoyed it as much as women.
Well, I feel like she's such a laddish character as well, that men, certainly of a certain age, can't fail but to recognise uncomfortably so much of ourselves in that character. And when you were writing the play, let's put a timeline on that actually, because you've done the Fringe and you've done 2 rounds of it here now at the Soho Theatre. How far back did this play go in its origins?
I wrote it 3 weeks before Edinburgh, before our opening night, but there was 6 months previous to then that I was told I had to write it, and I panicked for about 5 months with a lot of thinking and a lot of listening and a lot of writing down everything I knew I wanted to talk about. So about 6 months before Edinburgh, there was I was asked by Deborah Frances-White, who runs the London Storytelling Festival, to write a 10-minute piece of stand-up storytelling. And it started as that, and that was that first 10 minutes that I wrote, that just basically to make Vicky laugh, and it didn't really have as much sadness or hollowness in it as it does now. But there's a touch of it, but the audience that night said that they responded really well, and they said, you should do this you should take this to Edinburgh. And I sort of went, yeah. And then our amazing producer, Francesca, just did it basically in the space of a week, had hooked us up with the underbelly, and then I had 6 months to write it. But I think it's the best way to do it, actually, because I think if I didn't have an opening night that I had to be at, I don't know if I'd ever have written it, I'd be too scared. But, so it was sort of 6 months, and then a panicky 3 weeks when the orders came out.
And are you someone that's taking down notes, or just an open ear and trying to recall it all in that very condensed period of time and splurging it out on the page? Oh
yeah, no, taking loads of notes. If I have a thought that I think is interesting, that I fear might be interesting, I write it down. I've become one of those horrible people that if I hear something funny or say something funny, I'm immediately like, oh my god, put it in my notebook, But yeah, there's a lot of constantly asking myself, what would I want to see? What would I want to hear? What would make me jump, cry, laugh in the theatre? And that was the constant self-consciousness of the piece. Is just, if ever I can imagine myself feeling bored reading or watching this, then it's just scrapped. And there's a lot of it that I think that was scrapped because I felt like it was just slightly indulgent, and I think that's the hardest bit.
Well, you've definitely pulled that off, because reading it first, I had the experience of every page was more depraved than the last. Yeah. So I guess my next question is, were you very conscious of trying to outdo yourself with every one of the gut punches that seem to happen every few pages?
Yeah, I really wanted there to be a growing sense that there's something really quite wrong with this girl's psychology, and especially about sex. I think at the beginning, with the kind of the fun references to ex-boyfriends or threesomes and all that kind of stuff, that we can all sort of buy into that. But I want it to become more and more obsessive and more sort of robotic, and that it's actually it has very little to do with her own hedonism or her own search for pleasure. It's more to do with her filling a void in her life. And I think the more graphic the sex gets in terms of the language, the deader it gets in the performance, and that was hopefully the more that gave a sort of shocking effect.
Well, you said earlier, just a moment ago, that you can say and should be allowed to say anything on stage, but I'm wondering if there was anything too vulgar that didn't make it into the script, maybe because it simply was just too gross or offensive, or maybe knocked off the balance of the construct of the piece as a whole.
Really good question, because there was actually an alternative ending to Fleabag that we've all been sworn to secrecy.
And we can't share that one?
It's so awful. It's so awful. But we knew, as a company, and I sort of brought the whole dry ride company together and talked about the fact that I wrote this one slightly fluffy ending when everything was just all happy and everyone sort of floated off on a cloud together, and it didn't feel satisfying. And I sort of went way far in the other direction. And then the play would have become a play about that violent act. And I didn't want it to be like that. I wanted I wanted the ends to have a moment of drama, but essentially be mundane. That I wanted a sense of anticlimax at the end. And in the previous version, it was most definitely a climax. And as you say, one that would have just rocked the whole thing off kilter, and the play wouldn't really have made sense. It would have been awful. But it was in one preview, so there are 82 people in this world who think that's the end of Fleabag, and it's so terrifying.
And was their reaction anything to do with that change, or did you already have that sense going in?
I felt it as I was approaching the passage, because I was reading off a page still then, and I'd done the whole play, and it was just the final sort of 5 or 6 pages of the play. And I started reading it, and I could just feel it was wrong, and then I could feel the audience start to go, what? And I was going, oh my God. And I could feel our whole team in the back going, yeah, this was a bad idea. And so yes, the audience seemed really, really shaken actually by the end. And like, bless her, my mum, who's got such a keen eye, she came out afterwards and she said, I really loved it, but you need to change the last 5 pages. It was
literally the first thing she said.
Yeah, she was completely right. But it was really important because I think I had to go that far. And thank God for previews, and thank God for forgiving audiences who just want to be there to experience something at its genesis. But I did need to go that far, and we needed to, as a company, push to see where the limits of this story were, and we found them. And I'm glad.
And you wrote it. You rewrote within the space of 24 hours when your next.
Oh no, sorry. Yes,
performance was.
I was really right. So when I say the 3 weeks before, because we had a couple of previews in London just beforehand, so the play was pretty much written about a week before. 2/3 of it were written about a week before we went up, and then we would do playing around with the end, and then the ending was written on the train up to Edinburgh, which I mean it was a painful process finding the right ending, but knowing that we had to, and that the Dry Right and Vicky were just pushing me not to settle, and I was pushing them not to settle, and we had to keep digging until we found the right ending.
And
we did on the train, yeah.
For the folks at home, I suppose this next question will come with a spoiler warning, but with that ending being cyclical, for you, is it more about the fact that she hasn't learned as much as we'd probably like to think, or that society at large isn't really helping with this, being that the guy who's interviewing her has exactly the same dialogue and the same response?
Yeah, I mean, I felt like it was a moment in her life when someone had imagined that she was being sexual towards them. She was behaving in a provocative way, and she wasn't. And that was the clicking moment that stopped time for her. I feel like hopefully there's a sense that something can grow from the end when she just is finally honest with somebody and finally just says, I ruined my whole fucking life and it's all because of sex and porn and I'm confused and I've fucked everything up. And the idea that he sort of gives a little bit back with, well, I've sort of fucked everything up as well, and everyone's sort of fucked everything up a little bit, and the sense that actually, even though it feels like you say that people aren't communicating and that we are just running on this kind of this constant circuit of not being honest with each other, that there are occasionally little moments with people that you can make new friends very quickly. And I'd like to think at the very end, she makes a new friend.
Well, I first saw you here at the Soho Theatre in My Did I, and if you Google that, every review will open with the fact that your character is naked in a bathtub. There's a scene in Fleabag where she strips for a customer at the cafe. And I did wonder if maybe in any early iterations, being that you've done nudity on stage, whether you were going to do something with that scene, because to me that would have made sense, being that she is very obsessed with her self-image and her body, and it would have possibly shown that vulnerability of the character in another shade. But is it because the monologue has that confessional quality? The format of a monologue, it makes nudity more self-conscious in a way.
I think so, and because, and also she's playing all the characters, so in fact to switch halfway through and be like topless Joe. Also the conversation did come up, but both Vicky and I, when we talked about it, we sort of knew the answer, which was what Jack does very brilliantly, and I can't imagine I'd ever find a good enough reason for it, but I think it's very rare to find a play that absolutely requires nudity, and Jack's absolutely did in that, because it was set in a bath and it was beautiful, and that was part of the power of it. And I feel like if I'd taken my clothes off in that moment, that would have been the thing in the room. It would have been the fact that the actress had taken her clothes off, and it may have had an important impact to a certain degree, but I sort of feel the impact of the story and the language, and the fact that it's not happening in the moment, that it is all a retrospective story, and I just sort of felt it would have been distracting, and I would have just felt really self-conscious, I think.
With the last three, so including Jack's character as well, everything I'd seen you in prior to that was that there was kind of a period nature to, I'm thinking of Hay Fever, that where you were kind of, I mean, because physically and your voice, you have a great kind of fit for period stuff, I think. 'Cause there's nothing worse than when you go to see period plays and the people in those clothes can't wear them the right way, or they feel too modern. And then even in Tribes, although it's modern day, you're kind of very posh and obviously upper middle class. So I'm wondering, and maybe just subconsciously, this is a way for you to kind of fight against any kind of typecasting.
Oh yeah, it's an act of rebellion, definitely, I think. And I was lucky because those parts that I have played are awesome parts, and they're a lot of fun. But at the same time, I wanted to sort of shake off the kind of the corseted shackles of being kind of posh and lanky, and for a long time had a 20s haircut, which didn't help either. But I think, definitely, it's an act of rebellion. I still love playing those parts, but there needs to be a balance, and I think more often than not, you just don't get the same complexities in those characters that you do in darker works like Vicky's or Jack's and stuff. And it's that stuff. It's that kind of meaty, very modern stories about now. I'm sort of obsessed with people writing about now and how the world feels now. And this excites me so much. I love new writing so much I could explode. So.
Well, I feel like if you got that 1920s haircut back tomorrow, that perfect part, it's still out there for you, in that you could play you could have the coarseness of this with the period of Hay Fever by playing an uncensored flapper girl. Yeah,
I mean, that would be thrilling, because it's an amazing period, and I mean, not to mention just the clothes and the style and the energy of that period. I'd love it. No, I'd love that. Absolutely love that. It's mainly the characters, as long as you've got that kind of. It doesn't always have to be like coarse, rude people, but just people who contradict themselves and who are angry or upset or act out of character for some reason. Just that little bit of extra thing about so rarely found in sort of a lot of female dramatic characters.
And with the success you've been having with Fleabag recently, have you been thinking in any way, or have offers been coming in for more film and TV? Because I mean, people might have spotted you in The Iron Lady or Albert Nobbs, and that there was the cafe on Sky as well. But are you looking to go back into film and TV, or is Dry White and the theatre, is that very much where the focus is right now?
Oh no, I want to do everything. I'm so excited by that end of the industry as well, and it's sort of, and now that Fleabag really helped, because now I'm sort of making my own little tiny tinny noises in a corner of the industry about being a writer as well. I've had some opportunities to develop some work for screen of my writing that I'll also be performing in. So developing that at the moment and developing Fleabag.
So Fleabag the movie.
Or the TV show is being, we're developing at the moment. So which is a challenge because obviously there has to be more than one character in the
So
show.
you can make that happen. You can bring Joe.
Well, exactly.
It's got to happen.
Yeah, I'd love to see that. Yeah, so we'll see. But yeah, I love it all. I love it all.
And finally, with the fact that you're on your third run now, I can't imagine that before Fleabag you've ever been able to get into quite the groove with the character that you've accomplished here. I mean, what does that feel like?
It's like, it's sort of an amazing feeling because the different stages of this production were the first sort of panicky, kick-bollock scramble. I had no grasp on the character. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. We just sort of going up to Edinburgh and it was just like, just get something on that stage. And that whole memory is just such a blur of sort of panic. And then coming back here afterwards, it was the first time I was like, okay, I can think about this a bit more and I can enjoy it a bit more and I can explore it a bit more. And then, but then that was over before we knew it. And so this time it's so much fun because it's in a slightly bigger space. So there's a bit of a bigger crowd and I can sort of overact more and be a little bit more indulgent, which is great. But it's also really given me the chance to, as you say, stick my heels into the character a bit and find new things and find the sadness more and the poignancy more. Because before I think I was just crashing through like a kind of crazy train, just sort of trying to get it all out, whereas now. So I feel like it was a really important 3-stage process to do this play, and I would have felt very bereft if this final run hadn't happened, I think.
And will you be sad to see her go, at least in theatrical form, hopefully before that jump to television?
Yeah, I really, really will. It's been an extraordinary experience, and I've learnt so much as a actor and as a writer, and I will really miss it. But also, it's good to sort of say, right, that was that, and something you just have to move on. And so that's going to see what happens next.